Nice to meet you on our website. My name is Guy Marong, and I'm the managing partner of QB Consulting. This presentation will be done in English, but just for information, I do speak French, German, and Luxembourg. So thank you very much for coming over to our website. I will give you a little bit of an insight of the kind of work we do and the kind of approach we have. And hopefully we can outline a little bit the kind of work we could do together, QB Consulting, partnering with your company to secure your business in a better way. But just to put the basis, we're gonna a little bit go step by step. Normally when we start thinking about cybersecurity, we think about the bad guys. We think, well, maybe we have one bad guy. That's Mr. Robot in his hoodie trying to break into our website or to break into our company. In reality, there may be Mr. Robots, and I'm sure there are, and many hackers start like him. But today, basically, it has become an industry. So if I would take the example of a ransomware, which is a very typical type of attack which affects most companies, I may have the commercial side of the criminals as well. I want to do something that's a group of people. But they do lack the number of skills. So they would use other specialist criminals to give them access to your company. So maybe we have another guy here, which we can call the access broker. Obviously, once we have access to the company, and they don't really have to do anything to get access to it. They just buy your access to your company. And I want to do encryption or do ransom. Maybe I need to have the right equipment. So I will employ someone which gives me a ransom as a service platform, which is a software to basically encrypt your PCs or encrypt and manage the keys, manage the decryption, and in some cases also has a chat client to tell you exactly how you can pay the bad guy. So you may have heard about Conti Group, Reveal, many times. Obviously, if that works, at the end of the day, there is Bitcoin. These guys may also deal with a Bitcoin part of the business. Obviously may or may not have to deal with money laundering. So there's another two bad guys who also play a role. So obviously, this is the way the industry goes, and this is a fairly typical setup, and there may be more specialist players here and there. If we look at, obviously at other kinds of criminals, there are some criminals who are specialized in credit cards. Well, they are a little bit organized differently. There are also those who are specialized in espionage. In espionage, while the ransomware guy, obviously is going to make noise because your PCs will be encrypted or he claims a ransom. But the espionage guy is the opposite. He will be very silent. He will take more time, and he may access information. Information could be political. Maybe you are working for the European Commission and there is a lot of political information of interest to someone. It could be economic information, or more often it could be intellectual property which your company has developed over time and which may be of interest to someone. So these are espionage types. And of course, we also have nowadays nation-state offensive capabilities, and there are those who may pursue some goals, or either by themselves or using cyber criminals as a front end. So now if we look at your company, but it's not the way the bad guys look at it. They like may say, well, okay, I'm interested in their personal information database. Yeah, maybe I'm interested in their credit cards because actually I can sell credit cards wholesale. So that's obviously something I may be interested in. There could be intellectual property of some sort which is of interest to a criminal, which he can resell, or basically he can research in some sense on behalf of a customer, and so forth. And of course, there may be also cases where you have a production, and in some cases someone may want to disrupt that production. So typically the cyber criminals may pursue money, they may pursue information, or in some cases they may have in mind to cause damage. We have seen in Ukraine where we actually use cyber offensive capabilities. I worked for a company which is Sunny, which was affected by such kind of things because we were attacked by North Koreans who had obviously in mind to punish a certain company for the movies they had made. So obviously it's important in our discussion when we engage with you to understand, what are we trying to protect and which are the kind of criminals we may be facing on the other side. So we sometimes call them the adversary, who is on the other side and what do they want and how do they typically operate to get what they want. Now, so let's move a bit forward and look into, your company, but maybe a little bit more from an IT perspective. Obviously, most people would have a number of endpoints. We call them PCs, could be Macs. These days, it could be mobile devices. Yeah? And we may have many. Could be tens, it could be hundreds. Obviously, your problem is very different depending on the size of your inventory. In my case, I was responsible when I was still in Singapore. I was protecting about 50,000 PCs, which were distributed globally. Obviously, in many different separate companies, small and big, to big factories, to smaller R&D places. So it's not just one big place, but they're distributed. And I think that may be also your case. And at every scale, there is a bit of a different problem to solve. Yeah, of course, there's not only PCs and servers, but also servers. So that could be Windows servers, Linux servers, Unix servers, all kinds of things. Yeah. So, but for the simplification of our discussion today, I will concentrate mainly on the PCs and the Macs. Typically, the servers are very similar, except typically we want to have higher criteria or higher objectives for servers who are typically considered much more important or critical, sensitive, if you want. Now, if we look at the PCs, we typically would look at antivirus. We want to look at updating them, and this is quite an activity. And once we have done that, in principle, we're good. But in reality, it's a little bit more complicated. I think, generally speaking, we may have an inventory challenge. Most companies, it's not easy to have precise inventory. If you have 20 PCs, obviously you can inventorize rather quickly and almost materially. But if you have 100,000, 10,000, it's a little bit harder, and you may have an error rate between 1, 5, maybe 10% of uncertainty or error of the numbers. Yeah. Of course, if you have 50,000 PCs and you have a 10% error rate, there's 5,000 PCs which are unprotected. If you have even 1% on 50,000, it's still 500, so that's a serious problem. So obviously, absolute numbers and not only percentages matter here. Antivirus, in principle, anti-malware, if you want, obviously is an important part. Typically here we have to look into two things. We look at the health of your software. Sometimes the anti-malware agent could be corrupted or stops communicating, or the updates of the signatures or similar is not the right frequency or the right objectives. So that could cause us some trouble. And obviously, once health is fine, we can look at the security KPIs and metrics. Yeah, and similar to the updating. So in principle, this is looking at vulnerabilities and looking at the patching. Yeah, the typical challenge here is that in the past, maybe some people look at 90 days or 45 days or something like that, a number of days to patch. Today, we know that sometimes, typically, if a company announces a vulnerability and the patch which goes with it, the companies will take a while to patch. So the bad guys know that this is a window of opportunities, because now we know their weakness, and they have not yet remediated or removed it. Yeah, and we have then the first bad guys who develop exploit kits, which allow less technically skillful guys to exploit the vulnerability. And in the past, we were looking at 2 weeks. They take about 2 weeks to develop those and sell them to, of course, less technically inclined but motivated bad guys. But today we know sometimes it's only 1 day. So obviously doing well in vulnerability management and in patching is one of the most key items which we have to master on the cybersecurity side, and also would be one area where we would work closely together with you to actually achieve this, because there's many implications and many improvements we have to do. We cannot go from 90 days to 1 day. It is multiple steps where you have to innovate at every step, or simplify, innovate, find and improve the process, simplify the problem, etc., etc. So it is a challenging area, but the return of investment is very clear. Now, when we look at beyond the PCs and the servers, we may look at the internet. Internally, we have our network, and we may have some kind of firewall. Obviously, if your company is very complex and you have multiple buildings and you have in multiple countries, this will be very complex, and your network may be divided in multiple parts to basically segment what's available to someone and to avoid that people are able to move around too easily. And of course, in the internet, a typical company, I'm still simplifying here, you may have a website, or maybe your company homepage, or maybe you have another one, which is maybe your company, maybe e-commerce system. And typically, we're looking into securing those because, of course, they're exposed. So you may want to do pen testing here. In the old days, we would basically, some would say, well, one time a year or major change. But if your developers, on the other hand, are using Agile, maybe nowadays you have sprints, means when they deploy code of 2 weeks. So pen testing only once a year is not enough. On the other hand, if you want to pen test more, the problem is that it's possible, but pen testing these days costs maybe between $100 per man day to maybe up to $3,000 per man day, depending on how sophisticated the companies you're using. So this is not doable. We cannot test every week, every day, every month even. So obviously, then we will try to work out with you how can we move to actually what we call secure coding techniques. So that actually at every stage of the development, we have security gates, and every gate we check whether the code is okay. And then we move to the next gate, and finally, after 2 weeks, we push out the code in production. Yeah? And we would also look at security architecture, or we would look at maybe threat modeling to see what are the angles which are the most sensitive. I will here say that you may have your internal network, but as you move, you may use the cloud in some way or another. Maybe you use Amazon, or you have moved your Office things to Microsoft 365, or you may even use Azure for the most typical one. Obviously, you may use Google or others. Yeah. So obviously, then we have to look at a number of things which I will skip here today to secure all the different elements in Amazon. How do you configure? How do you control? How do you actually execute the work here? Have you done the lift and shift where you simply moved from internal to external? Are you using cloud native? If you did the lift and shift, obviously there's more duties you have to take care, including from the security point of view. And very much the same is true for Azure. Or if you use M365, then the question is, what program did you buy from Microsoft? And so it's quite complex, and there are many tiers. And so we have to look at depending what you purchased, what kind of protection do you get, and where are you covered and where you're not covered. Microsoft is also changing very often, so they also work in 2-week sprints. So how do we keep up with the configuration changes at Microsoft? So that's a very big activity where we would also support you. All the things here we have done here, we can say they are preventive work. Yeah. You have to basically also do incident management. So you may have to collect all the logs from all your apps. So the logs come in to what we call a SIM, which is essentially a tool which allows to analyze your application behavior and try to find a suspicious pattern, correlate certain things to actually discover whether you have been exposed. And obviously from there, we organize incident response. We have to have a number of use cases. If you do not describe to the system what is normal, not normal, and what you should watch, also you will not find very much. And incident response is we obviously want to know if something is happening. There's a playbook. We do this and this. But that's very important because it's not improvisation. When things happening, we have to prepare beforehand. We have to exercise. So typically nowadays, most people you do simulations, but they may do trainings. They may do desktop exercises, including with not only the security team, but also together with the IT team. And when we consider major things, and the ransomware can be a major thing, obviously we would also look into extending from technical to also the management. Maybe it could be legal team, could be your corporate communications team, could be your CEO, whoever needs to be involved, wants to be involved. to actually basically develop an incident response, which is not technical only, but actually enterprise scale. This is getting very important. In the old days, it's just a technical guys watching for something, but today, incident response is a company-wide exercise and something which has to be exercised. But how do you do so? How do you do that? What kind of playbooks do you use? How do you actually do simulations and so on? Is becoming a very important area. And obviously, we have seen, we do the above. You have to do it internally for internal issues, but also, of course, you have to also deal with your cloud presence in many ways. Yeah. So when we look at all these activities here, these are mainly technical activities. Maybe your management, maybe could be your senior executive team. They have no idea yet what you're doing. Yeah, the board may have no idea what you're doing. But what I can guarantee you, they are concerned because they know if an incident happens, it's not the CIO issue, it's not the CISO issue, it is the press and the public in general, or the authorities or the regulator will look towards them as being in charge. So they know that their responsibility is engaged. But unfortunately, we have a gap because we have the technical level here and we have a more management layer here. So obviously, there are many times, as we evolve, it's important that your security team also develops essentially an overview of risks. So what risks do we have in our company? What are the priority ones? Which ones have been remediated? What has been open for a long time? What's more critical and so on. We may even want to look at the progress in a good way, or are we doing operationally and so forth. So you may look at the KPIs or diverse metrics of interest to management, even though it's a big pyramid. So the management beyond just your security team needs a lot more. I would say about 100 plus typically on a daily basis to actually manage security. But it's not only day to day which is important. We need a strategy. We need to know, how are we going to improve structurally our situation, or in a sustainable and in a structural way our situation. So we have to look at the security strategy, which is linked to the IT strategy, which is linked to the business strategy. It may define the way we want to play the game in the next 2 or 3 years or 4 years, depending on your mid-range planning cycle. And obviously, as a result, we have to develop our roadmap. And the security costs more money. The important thing is that we understand the economics of what we do. So what is necessary to invest, how to be cost effective in the investment, which investments should be prioritized, how to get return of investment. So there are many aspects. So these are also, again, topics which we work with you to basically present something to your management. It's so important that the technical team and the senior management team enhance itself. So, and sometimes our engagement could be starting with yourself having to do a presentation, or having to do a budget presentation, or having to propose KPIs. It's easy to say, it's a lot more complicated to find the right ones and to define them in a precise manner and to have, really a meaningful plan. We have bad guys which are very smart on the one side and you on the other side. So we need to be as smart as the bad guys, and therefore we need to have a game plan. And that game plan has to be explained and has to be supported by the management, because obviously security is something we play every day, but also something which we can win on the longer term. Yeah. And obviously, most of our efforts are towards preventing problems. We know things happen, so we need to exercise also incident management as we have described it before. And we know also more that sometimes we cannot avoid. So we may have to look at aspects like resilience. Yeah? And we have seen in the recent regulations, so if you are in the financial sector, DORA, or if you are another sector, NIS2, are going regulations which are much more precise in the past, which much more clear sanctions. They learned that from GDPR, and also incident reporting requirements much stricter than before. Again, maybe they learned that from GDPR. So we're coming into a more practical but also more stricter regime, including in the case of DORA, certainly also of testing. So it's not just about checking the box, but also being able to be tested. And ultimately, obviously, our purpose is to resist the bad guys. So Hopefully, this gave you a little bit of an idea of where we can work together, and so hopefully you can see where we can help you. And obviously, if you want to get in touch on our website, there are many ways to do so. You can call us, you can contact forms, etc. So please do not hesitate. And no, let's just talk. It's not about spending money when we talk. It's about actually understanding what is your problem, how we can help, and obviously giving the first ideas of how we can improve. So please do not hesitate to get in touch with us, and we are looking forward to bring our expertise, which we acquired really by fighting hacktivists. We actually were engaged with many North Koreans in the past or other countries. So we learned a bit the hard way, but we don't want you to learn the hard way. So let's work together to protect your company. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.